Hey, what's going on everyone? Axel here. In this video, I'm going to talk about a very infuriating topic, often for most of the gaming community, and a topic that is very controversial in terms of is it okay, is it not okay, and that is the rise of DLC and microtransactions. And I want to go into also why companies are doing this. And is it right? Is it wrong? What do I think? Do I think gaming needs to go in this direction? Do I think gaming needs to go in a different direction, et cetera, et cetera? That's what I'm going to be talking about. So, first of all, let's talk about why we have DLC and microtransactions. Because back in the day, back in the PS2 era and before, really it was the PS2 generation in prior, games were released complete on disc, and DLC, season passes, all that stuff was very rare. There are only a couple exceptions on the PS2. I mean, I think like Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PS2, I know, had a little bit of DLC, and that's kind of ironic me mentioning that since I'm showing Battlefront footage. But anyways, today games are not complete on disc. Oftentimes, developers will actually, now it's the norm that most games are released with planned DLC or sometimes day one DLC. And why do developers do this? Why do companies do this? And the quick answer that a lot of people will jump to is that, oh, those darn devs are so greedy. And I admit that in a lot of situations, we see that, especially with, say, the game I'm showing right now, EA's Battlefront. When it was released a couple years ago, and it was very controversial because a lot of the game was DLC. You know, a lot of the game was locked off by DLC. And I think there are a lot of examples like this where developers should have put more of the game on the disc, and they put too much of the game on DLC just for reasons of wanting to make more money off of it. And I think they went too far. But I do sympathize somewhat because the reason why we have so many more monetization methods in games with like DLC and microtransactions and even in $60 games is because there's one thing that the gaming community just doesn't recognize enough and doesn't give enough credit for. And this does not mean I support what the gaming companies are doing, but you have to realize that gaming costs, development costs have gone through the roof compared to, say, just 10 years ago. The cost of developing a game today is so much more expensive. I mean, just imagine like during the Super Nintendo days, creating a game like Final Fight or just the original Super Mario Brothers. That was not that expensive back in the day because there's just not a whole lot to it. It's a pretty simple game, pretty simple coding. But these days, there's so much to every game. There's so many little details, there's so many textures. It takes years and years and years and years of development time to actually produce a full-fledged AAA title these days. And that's costs that just have to be reflected somehow in the price to the consumer. And I'm not saying that it's okay, the profit margins that a lot of companies are making these days off of games. I don't know personally a whole lot about it, but you have to realize that when costs go up, it's reasonable to expect the game companies to ask the consumers to pay more. Now, are they doing it the right way with microtransactions and DLC? I think absolutely not in a lot of circumstances. Now, there are some circumstances where I think they do it right. Say, take a game like Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. I think Nintendo did a good job with that. They released a full game with a ton of content and then asked players to pay a little bit more for a handful of characters they released as extra bonuses, extra cosmetics, skins, things like that. And I think Nintendo did a good job. There's companies like I've already talked about, EA, like EA's Battlefront and EA. They've done a terrible job with Battlefront. They didn't put enough game on the disc, and they didn't give enough value there. But I think what game companies, a lot of AAA game companies are really slipping on is just showing customers the value of what they purchase. And oftentimes the value is just not there. But the costs have gone up quite a bit, a lot. And I think we need to look at different ways for companies to monetize their games. For me personally, if a company puts in a ton of work into a game and gives me a really good amount of value for my purchase, I would much rather them just charge, say, $80 for the game instead of charge $40 or $50 for the game and then put microtransactions in it and cut off part of the game with like $10 or $20 of DLC. I think companies need to just start charging more for a game up front. I think the base point of $60 needs to go up. And a lot of people might say, "Oh, those greedy companies, they keep, they can't keep charging that much money for a game." Well, sorry, but the development costs to create games these days have just gone way, way up, and I don't think it's unreasonable to expect consumers to pay a little bit more. But what I do think is unreasonable is game companies tricking consumers, trying to go behind our backs and lock off a lot of the game from us in terms of DLC, using DLCs as a mandatory thing. DLC was never intended to be a staple in every single game. It's supposed to be bonus content, but when it becomes normal and a trend, it's no longer bonus content. It's just content that they lock off from us. It's just a part of the game that is not being given to us on the disc. They're cutting it off and selling it only as digital. And I don't like that. I don't want to buy 2/3 of my game physical and 1/3 of my game as digital. I want to buy an entire full complete game on disc. I would much rather go buy the newest, I don't know, I haven't played Call of Duty in years, but say next year when they release Call of Duty, I would much rather them just charge $80, $90 for the full game with all of the content on the disc rather than charge $60 for the game and then release a map pack for $7 a couple months later, and then release another Mac pack for $7 a couple months later. I want them to just sell me the full game, and if a game company is willing to offer me $80, $90 worth of content, I'm willing to pay that price. Now, why don't companies do this? I think it's because the consumers are particularly sensitive to price increases in the store. Already, I think if you put a game, even if it's a great game, that's worth all the money in the world, well, that's exaggerating, but even if you put a game out there that's legitimately an amazing experience, that's worth $80. If you put it on the game shelf, it might not sell well beside a game that's not nearly as good, but is selling for $40. You're asking customers to pay a lot more upfront for an experience they don't know a lot about. Now, I think you can learn a lot about the game through reading reviews, and I think if we do see some kind of price increase of base games go up to, say, $80 or so, I think you would see a lot more consumers actively researching games before they buy. You'd see less games buy on the fly. But I think companies all in all are just scared to go over that $60 mark. That $60 standard has been the standard for quite a while. And going above that, you run the risk of really running off people from initially buying the game at all. So for a lot of companies, it's better to nickel and dime consumers to kind of suck them into the game rather than expect customers to make this big upfront purchase. But me personally, I would rather them just charge me full price for the full game in the store. If it costs $80 or $90 to develop, if that's what they have to sell it at to get a reasonable profit, then that's fine with me. I just want a company to show me that they're offering $80 worth of $90 worth of value, and I'd be willing to pay that price. But the companies have to do a good job of stepping up and showing us where that value is, how we're being offered that value. I just get really annoyed nowadays that every single game that you buy in a store is not a full game, like almost. I hate that. Just offer me the full game at a fair price. That's all I want. Look, I'm not an unreasonable consumer. I think game companies should make a solid profit off of their games. They are a business. They do put a lot of work into these games, and they deserve to make a little bit of profit, because without making profit, they won't continue to make great games. They need a motivation to make great games. So, yeah, game companies, that's my message to you. Just please start offering us full games again, like we saw in the PS2, original Xbox, PS2, the GameCube, that generation. Just please offer us full games, complete on disc, and show us why we should be paying a little bit more up front for it. I'd much rather have that as someone who enjoys owning their games. I'd much rather have that than have the standard game I buy nowadays be half of a game and I have to buy the other half online. Because who knows, in 10 years, 15 years when the servers go down and you can't get those patches, every single game, say for my Xbox One in 10, 15 years, every single game might just be gimped. It's going to be a GIMP version of the game if someone else gets that game in the future and can't get access to the DLC because the servers are all down because the console's too old. So as a collector, that really appeals to me. But guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is just my rambling thoughts on this topic in DLC. Might be a little different from the standard opinion you'll hear on the internet, which is from gamers, which is, oh, you know, all this reliance on DLC is evil and greedy and terrible. I understand, and I don't agree with how the game companies in general are acting towards this, but I kind of understand why they're doing it. They've got to make money off of these games that are becoming way more expensive to create. So guys, please leave me a comment if you enjoyed the video, and leave me a comment just telling me what you think on this topic. That's all for today. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a good one.